Hi, I'm John and I'm here to tell you guys some stories today. When I see you smile, heaven could never be half as sweet as all I see. I see a world happy and free when you smile. Whole fields go to bloom. I smell the sweetest perfume. It's a miracle, the way you light up a room when you smile. When you smile, make my dreams come true. Once upon a time, there was a forest, and the forest was so tall, and the leaves were so thick that the people called it the Black Forest. Now, in the middle of the Black Forest, there was a clearing, and in the clearing, there was a pretty little town. At the edge of the clearing, almost reclaimed by the forest, there was a little white toy shop. It was famous the world over. Now every day, the shopkeeper and his son would go and they would open up the shop and they'd see the glistening toys. And there were toys of every kind. There were raggedy dolls, and dolls made of wood, and dolls made of porcelain. There were every kind of stuffed animal, giant teddy bears and small ones, wind-up toys, robots, and clowns. Soldiers of every description from all over the world. And there was even a Jack-in-the-Box, but more about him later. Now, what nobody imagined, especially the shopkeeper and his son, was in the evening when they locked the door and headed home for their dinner in their bed, in the twilight of the store, all the toys slowly came to life. And by midnight, there'd be a roaring party with toy cannons shooting popcorn and marshmallows across the room, and teddy bears playing drums, and foxes playing fiddles, trains running around, all the dolls and soldiers dancing together, everybody jumping and playing in enjoyment. But as the stars started to disappear, the toys would clean up from their revelry and climb back to their places, and in the morning light, there they would stand, still glittering in the morning sunshine. Now in this store, there were two toys that were special. Special because they were in love. On one shelf, about 12 inches tall, a toy soldier stood at attention with clear eyes and a great red coat with giant gold buttons. And across the room, on another shelf, in a little glass case, there was a tiny ballerina up on her tippy toes in a dress of white lace with a halo of pink and white flowers. At first the two were so shy of each other, but as time went on, they stole glances and were caught in the web of love. So that now, every night, all they could do was dance together. They would only dance with each other as partners. And all day, they spent just dreaming of the next night and being together. One night, when it was getting light and the toy soldier was climbing back up onto the shelf, the jack-in-the-box exploded and knocked him to the floor. One of his legs was broken off. Somehow he made it back up to his shelf and stood there at attention, but he was so nervous, so afraid that the ballerina wouldn't love him anymore. But night came, and there she was, and her love was completely unchanged. And they spent the night dancing together, and she helped him balance on his legs. And then he was happy. But then something terrible happened. One day, a family, a mother and 2 children, a boy and a girl, came to the shop, and the children were running around looking at the toys. And then the girl came up to the mother and said, Mommy, look at that beautiful ballerina. Oh, do you think you could buy it for me? Well, said the mother, tomorrow is your birthday. I think it would be all right. She paid the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper took the ballerina down and wrapped her in tissue paper and put her in a brown box and tied it with a gold ribbon. And the family carried her out, never to return to the toy shop again. The next night, when the soldier awoke, his love was gone, and giant tears rolled down his cheeks and fell onto his gold buttons. The next morning, when the shopkeeper got to the store, his son said, Dad, look at the soldier. His leg's broken, and he's all rusty. I'm afraid nobody's going to buy him, said the shopkeeper. So the boy threw the tin soldier out the window, where he rolled down an embankment and into a gutter running with rain. And so the adventure began. Once in a town in the Black Forest, a little white toy shop stood, and a little tin soldier with only one leg lived in a castle of wood. And across the room, on another shelf, in a little glass case, a tiny ballerina lived in there, all in a dress made of lace. And from where the little tin soldier stood, they could see each other so clear. And the little tin soldier watched over her with a love that was so dear. Then one day sadness came, the tiny ballerina got sold. The little tin soldier was thrown away, and into the gutter he rolled. The water carried him to the sea and to many far off lands. He made many children happy as he passed through their tiny hands. And then one day they met again in a house in the land of iron. And when the clock on the wall struck the midnight hour, they jumped into the fire. Once, there was a husband and wife. They were happy and they were in love. But as year followed year, a certain sadness came into their life because they never had any children. One day, the wife was buttoning her dress and she was having some difficulty. She noticed this had happened for several days. And she said, "I'm probably getting old and fat." So she looked into the mirror and she noticed that her cheeks were rosy and bright. And her eyes were also unnaturally bright. In fact, she looked young and almost beautiful. And then all of a sudden, it came to her. She ran to her husband and said, "Husband, I think I'm going to have a child." And together they were overjoyed. Now as she waited expectantly for the child to come, she would often sit in her bedroom and look out the window into a neighbor's garden. Some people said the garden belonged to a powerful sorceress, but they'd never seen anyone like that. But certainly the flowers were exotic and the fruits looked rich and beautiful. And in the corner of the garden, there was a dark patch of leaves, green leaves, Rapunzel. Oh, so fragrant it was, and how the wife craved that Rapunzel. She went to her husband and said, "Husband, please go down into the garden and get me some Rapunzel. I don't feel right about stealing. Oh, please, I just need that Rapunzel, please." Now the walls to the garden were tall and there were no steps. So the husband lowered himself by a rope down into the garden. His wife threw him a basket and he picked an entire basket of Rapunzel and brought it up to his wife. Oh, the first taste of the Rapunzel almost made her faint, and she ate and ate and ate until her heart content, and then she slept better than she had ever slept before in her entire life. But when she woke up in the morning, she just wanted more. She craved it. "Husband, please go get me more Rapunzel." Again, he lowered himself down the rope, but he had just picked the first leaf when he was startled and jumped from a voice behind him. "So, stealing from our neighbors, are we?" He started to explain, but she didn't listen. "I can't decide. Should I turn you into a fly, a worm, a lizard, or should I just strike you dead right on the spot?" "Oh, listen, it's my wife. She's with child. She just needed the Rapunzel. I don't steal." "Oh," smiled the sorceress. "So that's how it is. Well then, go home and tell your wife she can have all the Rapunzel she wants." Thank you, he said. "But the day after your child's birth, I will come, and it will be mine." What? He started to beg, but the witch was gone. She had disappeared into thin air. The husband went home. He couldn't bring himself to even tell his wife what had happened, and he didn't tell her until the day of the birth. She cried for some time and then said, "But it was probably just said in a moment of anger. How will she even know that the child was born?" But sure enough, on the second day, the sorceress strolled into the nursery, and the parents watching on silently and powerless, she picked up the child, held it in her arms, and disappeared. The parents never saw the little girl, Rapunzel, again. Little did they know, though, that all the time their daughter was living right next to her, right next to them, even playing in the witch's garden. But they couldn't see her, so great was the power that surrounded the sorceress. And the girl grew, and she grew tall and beautiful, and her hair was so long and golden, it was a wonder to see, and her eyes were bluer than the sky, and her lips were like 2 roses. But when the girl grew to be 12 years old, the witch said, "Now come with me, and I will take you to a safe place." The witch walked her into the wilderness and took her to a tower that had no steps. And she left Rapunzel there alone, though she would come back every day to give her what she needed and fulfill her every need. Now Rapunzel was not lonely in the tower. She had never had friends. She had never known anyone but the witch that she called Mother. So she spent her days looking out over the beautiful horizons and listening to the bird song and teaching herself songs of her own. And so she would sing, and she was content. But one day, a prince came into the forest hunting. And as he was hunting, he thought he heard a strange sound, a beautiful sound. And as he followed it and tracked it through the forest, it became clearer and clearer. It's such a beautiful song. And then he got to a clearing, and he saw her for a second in the peak with her long golden hair hanging over the window. But quickly she disappeared. He spent the rest of the day walking around the tower, waiting to see what would happen, hoping to see the girl's face again. It was then that an old woman appeared and stood beneath the tower and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your long hair." And down came a cascade of golden hair that was unbelievable to the prince. And in wonder, he watched the little lady climb up the hair, and he glimpsed the beautiful face one more time before the witch disappeared into the tower. The next day, the prince waited, trying to get his courage up, and soon enough, by mid-morning, he did approach the tower and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your long hair." And the perfumed silk of golden hair came falling down, and eagerly he climbed up. But when he got close, he saw shock on Rapunzel's face. She had never seen a boy before. He knew what had happened and said, "Please don't be scared. It's just your song was so beautiful. I had to come see you." And there was such warmth and depth in the prince's eyes that Rapunzel let him climb up and enter the tower. So they spent many days together, talking and laughing and getting to know each other. Finally, they even made plans for her escape. Now I'm going to tell the story through the prince's eyes. What the prince didn't realize was that the day before their escape, Rapunzel made a mistake in her great innocence. After the witch had come into the tower, she said, "Why is it you hurt my head so much when you climb, whereas the boy—" "So, we've been having company, have we? And I tried so hard to keep you safe from the world." She grabbed Rapunzel, and with a knife she cut off her hair and tied it to a hook by the window. And then they went down the tower, and the witch led Rapunzel into the wilderness, where she was swallowed. Meanwhile, the prince was coming to the tower, and the witch returned and waited for him in the top. Then she heard him say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your long, long hair." And the hair fell down to his feet. He was climbing up, and he was nearly to the top when he looked up and saw the fiercest, most powerful face ever. And he let go his hold on the hair and fell hundreds of feet to the ground. He was not killed. He was caught in a great rose bush. The rose bush saved his life, but two of its thorns pierced his eyes, and he was blind. Then he staggered into the wilderness, and for many years wandered near starvation. Finally, one day, he heard a sound. He couldn't believe it. He followed closer. It was Rapunzel's voice singing. He staggered into a clearing, and out of a cave came Rapunzel with two beautiful children, a boy and a girl. She ran towards the prince. She held him to her, and she cried tears of joy. When those tears touched his eyes, he could see again. He hugged his children and declared that they would return to the castle. When they got there, they were feasted and celebrated for weeks, and they always held the heart of the people there for all the prince had been through, and for his beautiful Rapunzel. Once upon a time there was a young man, and this young man was a great hunter. He was such a great hunter that the coyotes and the ravens would follow him. But he did not hunt for sport. He only hunted when he needed food or clothing, or his family needed something. One day, the hunter crouched by a spring in the trees, and a young buffalo cow approached through the trees. His fingers tightened on the bowstring. He was just ready to pull it, when all of a sudden something happened, like as if he had fallen under a spell, as if he had slept for just 1 second. And when he opened his eyes, the buffalo was gone, and instead, sipping from the stream, was a beautiful girl with strange clothes and her hair down long and not braided. And the girl, she smelled like sage and wild prairie flowers. And the hunter knew immediately that he was in love. He married the girl and took her home. And they soon had a son that they called Calf Boy. The only problem was that the hunter's mother and sisters could be quite cruel to the girl. "He has married a woman without a family," they said. "She is not like one of us at all. She should leave." But the hunter just took all this calmly. He really paid them no attention. But one day he was out hunting when they looked fiercely at the girl and said, "You're nothing but an animal anyway, and that so-called son of yours, you should leave. You should leave now." Silently, the girl picked up Calf Boy and walked out of the tent. When the hunter got home and realized what had happened, he was angry, but he did not tarry in his anger. He walked right out of the tent, and he spent the whole day tracking his wife and his son. And finally, just before sunset, he saw a strange teepee covered with strange designs that he had never seen before. And outside, Calf Boy was playing. The hunter walked up and Calf Boy ran to him and said, "Mother said we are leaving. We are going back to Buffalo Nation. She does not want you to come." "Of course I will come. You are my son, and she is my wife." He went into the tent, and his wife had made stew for him. They ate it, and soon they were asleep. But then there were birds, and the hunter awoke alone. Everything was gone. He wondered if it had been a dream. But he looked, and he saw a circle in the prairie grass where the tent had been. The next day, he tracked them again and again. Just before sundown, he saw the tent, and outside again Calf Boy was playing. "Father, Mother does not want you to come. Tomorrow she will make the whole land dry. You will not be able to follow us." "You are my son. She is my wife. I must be with you. Of course I will follow you." "Okay, Father, then. She will make the land very dry, but I will try to leave a little bit of water for you, in my tracks." So that night he went in to the tent, and this time after dinner he tied his belt through his wife, and then he took her long black hair and tied it around his arm so that she couldn't escape without his waking. But when he woke in the morning, again he heard the birds. "They've gone. They've gone home. They've gone back to Buffalo Nation." So the hunter followed, and he followed the tracks. And just like his son had said, every once in a while in one of the tracks, he found a little bit of water to sustain him. But a strange thing happened. At about high noon, the tracks started to change. And they started to change from human tracks into the tracks of a buffalo calf. He kept following, and he came to a tall ridge, and he was climbing up it when a buffalo calf came running down, and it spoke to him in the human voice, the voice of his son. "Father, do not cross the ridge. Mother does not want you to come. She says the buffalo will kill you." "I must come," said the father. "You are my son, and she is my wife, and I love you both. I am not afraid." "Then they might ask you to recognize us, but we will all look alike to you. But when you pass me, I will wiggle my left ear, and you will know me. And I will put a giant burr on Mother's left shoulder, so you will know her. Be brave." And the boy disappeared over the ridge. Slowly, the hunter climbed until he was at the top of the ridge, and he looked out. And as far as he could see for miles and miles, there was nothing but buffalo. And he walked down among them. Soon out from the herd came a giant buffalo bull, saying, "How dare you come here after what your family has done to my daughter?" But the hunter just stood straight and looked into the bull's eyes. "Ah, this straight-up person is very brave," said the bull, and the murmur went through the whole buffalo herd. "Very brave, very brave. Maybe you have saved yourself, straight-up person. I will ask you, go find your son. Show us your wife and that you recognize them." Roared the bull, and all of a sudden, all the buffalo started to arrange themselves in circles. On the outer circle were all the bulls, and on the inner circle, all of the calves. and on the innermost circle, all the cows were arranged. The hunter started to walk around the inner circle until one of the little buffaloes twitched his left ear. He put his hand on his back and said, "My son." "Ooh," said the buffalo, "this is a very special person. He calls him son. Now find your wife." He walked to the innermost circle and circled until he found one buffalo that had a burr on its left shoulder. He rested its hand affectionately on her back and said, "My wife." Oh, the murmur went through the buffalo. He calls her his wife. "Straight up person, today you have saved yourself. Today we will make you one of us." So they put the hunter in a special teepee, and they gave him water for 3 days and 3 nights. And on the last morning, all of the buffalo rushed, and they tore down the teepee and got to his body, and they rolled it in the dirt, and they pushed it with their hooves and their snout deeper and deeper into the dirt. And then they backed away, and the hunter stood up. For now, he was on 4 legs. He was a buffalo. Once upon a time, in another world, there were 2 brothers, Lewis and Abel, and they were twins, but they were as different as could be. Lewis, he did everything perfectly. Everyone loved him. If somebody told him what to do, it was done perfectly, as his parents always knew it would be. He got straight A's in school, and he was very accomplished. Abel was as different as could be. He could not do anything right. At school, he always got straight F's. In fact, he spent more time in the principal's office than he did in class. If they sent him to do a chore, they could be assured that the chore would be done wrong. Soon, everybody just started calling him silly. Nobody called him Abel anymore. Even his own parents called him silly. Now one day, Lewis came back from an errand. He walked into the house after dark, and he put 2 bags down on the table, and he was noticeably pale. And when he moved, Silly could see that his hands were shaking. "What's the matter with you, Lewis?" I got the shivers and shakes. I hate going to the grocery store at night because you have to come home through the graveyard, and I always get the shivers and shakes. Oh, I wish you could go." Silly's eyes were getting big. "Oh, I think I would go if I could get the shivers and shakes. Do you think I could get the shivers and shakes?" "Oh, yeah, dude, you would definitely. It's like really scary. So the next time, I'll go." So several days later, just before dark, it was time for him to go to the store. "Now, do you have everything right? You know what to get, Silly?" "Yeah, I think I'll get it right. I get it right." But the whole time, all he was thinking about was getting the shivers and shakes. He got to the store, and instead of getting rice, he got ice. Instead of getting soup, he got Fruit Loops. And instead of getting macaroni, he bought a little pony which he put on a rope and followed him towards the graveyard. The sky was the color of ashes, and the first stars were disappearing when he entered the graveyard, pulling the pony, and the door shut behind him. He was walking in, and he noticed that there were shadows coming over the hills, coming straight towards him. That's strange. Why would there be shadows when there's no sun out? But they kept coming closer, And Silly kept walking, and soon he saw that it was an army of centipedes, and they were going over his shoe tops and ankles. He started kicking at them and stepping on them and crushing them, and kept walking. You are disgusting things, he kept saying. Disgusting. And he walked through them to the other side. Soon he got to a valley, and in the valley was a lake, and rising out of the lake was a fine white mist that took all different kinds of shapes, the shapes of trees and women and ghosts. And they gathered and they whispered, and soon they took the shape of a giant bird, and the giant bird flew straight towards him and went right through his head. Whoa, that was weird, said Silly. He kept walking. A woman's hand came right up out of the ground with red nails and rings on every fingers. How rude, said Silly. And he kept walking till he got to the gate. And he shut it behind him and went home and put the melting ice on the table and tied the pony to the door. What is this? Said Louis. You got all the wrong stuff. Yeah, big deal. I didn't get the shivers and shakes either. You said I'd get the shivers and shakes. Time went on, and with it grew Silly's fascination with the shivers and shakes. Now, in this world, when you were 15 years old, something happened. Your parents would give you $500 and a backpack, and you would leave. And you would have to go out into the world and make your way on your own and find a job and your own place of living. Now, Louis knew exactly what he wanted to do. He'd always been fascinated with blowing things out of glass, mermaids and castles and dragons and such. So he went for an apprentice with a glassmaker. And by the time he was 30, he had his own factory and he was very rich. Now, Silly, of course, he had no idea what he was going to do. So he went out on the road and started hitchhiking. I guess he was looking for the shivers and shakes. Soon he was picked up in a truck with some other boys that were doing the same thing. One boy said, "Oh, I always wanted to sail. I long to see faraway places. I'm going to join the Navy." And another boy said, "I'm going to go to college. I don't know if I want to be a lawyer or a doctor, but I will decide." And the other guy said, "I'm joining the army. I've always wanted to be in the army." Then they looked at Silly and said, "What about you?" I want to get the shivers and shakes," he said, and they all broke out laughing. "That's the craziest thing we've ever heard," they said. But Silly just looked out at the passing scenery. That night they got to a hotel, and they were sitting around with the innkeeper, and they were talking and laughing over coffee after dinner, when one of the boys said in jest, "Hey, tell him what you want to do." "I want to get the shivers and shakes," he said. "Well, maybe there is a future in that," said the innkeeper. "Down the highway, about 30 miles, there's a... Don't tell him about that! 40 young men have died already." "What?" Silly's eyes got big. What are you talking about?" "As I was saying," said the innkeeper, "there's a dirt road, and down the dirt road there's a castle that belongs to the king. They say it's haunted by 3 spirits. And the king has said that if any young man can spend 3 nights in the castle and survive, that he will get to keep the castle and half the king's fortune and the king's daughter's hand in marriage." "Ooh," thought Silly, "I'll do it. But you have to understand, 40 men have already died. Nobody could get even through the first night." "I'll do it," said Silly. So the next day he walked up to the castle and he knocked on the door. 2 soldiers came and said, "What do you want?" I want to stay 3 nights in the castle. Are you sure you want to do this? Absolutely, said Silly. So they took him in to the king's official, and the king's official also said, you sure you want to try this? You understand that 40 men have died before you. I want to do it, said Silly. Okay, said the official. Then you may have any 3 things you need. What will you need? Well, I'll need a fire. So could you give me wood and matches? And could that count as one thing? Yes, I think that's fair, said the official. And I'll need a big, long knife. Of course, said the official. And I'll need a giant slab of roast beef. Yes, said the official. A boy does get hungry. So the official and the soldier that evening disappeared as they were wont to do every evening before it got dark. Silly sat down and he built a fire. He sat before it. He sliced pieces off of his roast beef and put them on his knife, stuck them into the fire to cook. And when he was done eating, he lay down on the sofa. Soon, he was sound asleep when bong, 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 the midnight bells were tolling. And then he heard a strange sound. Through the door came a giant black cat, at least 8 feet tall, standing on its hind legs with red claws and red eyes and sharp, sharp teeth. And the cat moved into the room closer and closer. And then Silly saw that behind it was another black cat, just the same, and another one behind. 12 giant black cats all walking and circling him on their hind legs. Silly looked at him and said, you cats had better stay away from my roast beef. But they just got closer. I'm telling you, you're not having a bite of it. And their giant red eyes looked at him hypnotically. Finally, Silly saw a bag in a corner of the room, a burlap bag. He picked it and he started sneaking up behind the cats one by one and stuffing them into the burlap bag. It was so full, he carried it to the edge of the tower and he dropped it into the moat below, where it turned into red smoke and hissed. Silly got back on the sofa and fell asleep. When the soldiers came in the morning, they saw him on the sofa and they said, another one dead. They went to pick him up to take him for burial when Silly said, oh, good morning, what's up? You're alive, they said. Well, yeah, why wouldn't I be? What, did you see anything last night? I don't know. These big black cats came and they were trying to get my roast beef, so I threw them off the tower into the moat. It was really weird scene. You survived the first night in the castle. You are the first man to do it. The Silly thought to himself, yeah, but I didn't get any shivers and shakes. So the next night he sat down again and he cooked his roast beef and soon again lay back on the sofa and fell asleep when he heard a different sound. Into the room walked a little man whose body was all twisted up, and his hair was long and white like moldy hay, and his sockets of his eyes had no eyes within them. They were empty. And then, looking straight at Silly, the old man put his fingers through his hair and he pulled his head off and dropped it on the floor at Silly's feet. "Oh, man," said Silly. "Sit down. Put yourself together." He picked up the head and screwed it on the old man's head. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. You look awful. I'm going to give you some roast beef to eat." So he cut off pieces of roast beef on the knife, and slowly he was feeding the old man roast beef. And it was kind of disgusting because head wasn't on quite straight and juice was running down the old man's shirt. But he ate it all. And then Silly said to him, "I'm bored." He looked and he saw some big thigh bones and skulls over in the corner, and it gave him an idea. "Come on up, dude," he said. "Let's play hockey." So they spent the rest of the night playing hockey. And when the sky was getting just at first light, the old man just stood still, and he looked at Silly, and he put his fingers through his head, and he pulled it off. But this time he put it under his arm and walked away. The next day, the soldiers came and found Silly sleeping just the same as before. They were afraid he was dead, but when they touched him, he did, of course, awake. "Oh, hey, dudes, what's up?" "Did you see anything last night?" they said. "Well, this crazy guy came and he kept taking his head off." "You spent the night with the headless man and survived?" "Yeah, he was a pretty weird dude, but he's got to say he was a pretty good hockey player." "If you can survive one more night in this castle, you'll have a fortune and a princess." "Yeah, but will I ever get the shivers and shakes?" said Silly. On the third night, it was the same. He made his fire, cooked his roast beef, and ate it, and sat down on the sofa. Soon fell asleep. Bong, bong, bong. The chime struck midnight, and he heard a strange scraping sound. Shh, 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 shh. Into the room came a giant skeleton. Its head almost touched the ceiling. It must have been 14 feet tall. It was walking straight towards Silly, and it sat at the foot of his bed. "Whoa, what's up, skeleton?" said Silly. The skeleton said nothing. It looked into space and said, "Rise, rise." And the sofa rose up into the air and floated. "Whoa," said Silly. "This is cool." Then the skeleton said, "Ride, ride." And the sofa started floating slowly around the room. "Whoa," said Silly. And then the skeleton looked into space and said, "Faster, faster." And all of a sudden, the sofa sprang through the door, up and down corridors. Silly was holding on to his neck going, "Yoo-hoo, ride 'em, cowboy!" Up and down staircases, and finally down, 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 down to the dungeon, where it smashed straight into a wall. The skeleton turned into white powder on the floor, and Silly was completely knocked out. The next day, the soldiers came and said, "He didn't make it. We can't find him anywhere." But they kept looking until one of the soldiers yelled up from the dungeon, "He's down here! He's dead!" "Well, too bad," said the soldiers. "We kind of hoped he would make it." They went down there, and there he was, dead on the floor. They went to pick him up, and he woke and said, "Oh my God, I have such a terrible headache." And so he had spent 3 nights in the castle and lived. Dun, dun, da, dun, 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 da, dun. He had the princess in marriage. He had possession of the castle, which is now richly furnished. He had treasure chests full of gold. But he spent his day looking out of his bedroom window with his feet propped up, saying, "Life is so boring. All I ever wanted was to get the shivers and shakes, and I never will. Oh, life is so boring." The princess, of course, was disgusted with him. She went down into the kitchen where they kept a fish tank full of trout for their breakfast. She had her soldiers fill it with ice, and they went up towards the bedroom. Still, Silly was sitting there saying, "I'll never get the shivers and shakes. I'll never get the shivers and shakes. It's hopeless, hopeless." The soldiers came up behind him and dumped the ice over his head, and Silly went, "Ah!" And his wife looked at him and said, "So now you've gotten the shivers and shakes. Get over yourself." This fairy tale is a little bit different. It was written from kids from around here, from Santo Domingo Pueblo and San Felipe Pueblo and the town of Algodones. And it was written about 25 years ago. So the children who wrote this fairy tale, they'd probably be in their 40s now. So I think I'm going to read this one. And it's called The Iceman's Love. One day, in early fall, a family headed north into the Arctic on a hunting trip. On the third night, there was a light snow, and they parked their RV at the edge of the dirt road and soon went to sleep. At very first light, the daughter, a little girl of about 7 years, rose alone and went out. The world was cold and strangely silent. Snow-covered mountains seemed to surround her in the distance. She was returning to the RV when it happened. The sun looked out, and with it, a gentle flurry of snow. Everything sparkled, and she felt enchanted, as if she stood alone in a giant snow globe. She felt the air tremble, and with it a shadow moved on the white ground. Her eyes followed it up into the sky, and glimpsed great white wings. The bird circled her again and again, and spoke straight to her heart in a kind of song, but a song that wasn't made of sounds, but of flight. And the girl joined the bird in the thrill of flying. The bird perched on a giant boulder. The sun came out again, and she saw it wasn't a boulder at all, but a man sparkling and transparent like ice, with great golden eyes like the owl. They were perched on his great wrist, and the Iceman spoke to the bird like a pet. And then they were gone, and they flew again. There was an explosion, a gunshot, and falling. Then everything disappeared. She was alone with the bird on her lap, and it was like they were on a mountain peak, and they could see the world spread beneath them. But there was no mountain. They were in the clouds. She understood. The bird had been killed and taken her with it to heaven. Her uncle had shot the bird. He was looking for it, but could not find it. She saw herself kneeling on the ground and wondering how she could be in two places at once, and why her uncle could not see them. The sound of a drum filled her ears. The sky was darkening in the Iceman's shadow, and he danced between the mountains, first slowly in sadness, and then the drum quickened and his movements sharpened with anger. The wind was ripping through his hair. She could feel the drumming all through her. Then she realized it was the bird's pulse. She caressed the owl's silky feathers and was happy to see it had no wound or blood. Now she saw her family spreading out on the scene, and there was a great fear all around them. The howling wind covered their cries, but she knew they were calling her name. She and the bird had vanished from the earth, leaving her family with the Iceman's vengeance all around them. Day was night, and the wind became a blizzard of snow. The family returned to the RV and tried driving to look for her or escape. A giant white bear rose before the vehicle and seemed to throw it off the road where it wouldn't move. Days and nights passed as the Iceman toyed cruelly with his prey. They were prisoners in the RV. At night, hungry wolves circled them. They were running out of fuel with no way to stay warm. The children cried, and the grown-ups panicked. The Iceman danced, and lightning split the sky. The Iceman danced. Wind and wolves screamed together. The Iceman danced, and terror reigned. The girl turned to caress the bird. The golden eye spoke to her heart, and the girl pleaded with it. "This is a magic place, made of love. I don't understand any of it. You still have wings. Fly to him. Use the love to save us." The bird stirred, and without really leaving, it flew out of heaven. The shadow of its wings trembled on silver plains like a dark cross, till it perched again on the Iceman's wrist. The Iceman was very still. The girl could hear the words as if they were spoken aloud. "I am here for the last time, but I am happy. I love you. And I love the girl who came with the hunters. Let the rest go. Let them go and show me the greatness of your love. I want to feel it one more time." The Iceman danced for the bird, and as he did, the sun broke through clouds that were quickly vanishing. The Iceman danced, and the world was gold. The Iceman danced, and the owl flew into the sun. The Iceman danced his love dance and disappeared. As the people crawled out of the RV, they saw the girl standing in the miracle of sunlight. Her mother threw herself sobbing at her feet. Once upon a time, there was a robot city. And in this city, there was a robot with a broken heart. The others tried to fix him. They took him to the operating room. But it was no use. They couldn't fix him. So they took him out and they put him on the robot garbage pile. There were robot legs and robot arms, robot batteries, robot tools, whole robots and robots in pieces, robot legs and robot brains. He climbed to the top of the pile and he tried talking to them. "My heart was broken, you know." But they couldn't talk. They couldn't even listen. Their batteries were broken. So the robot sat on top of the pile of garbage and he looked out at the sky. It was fall, and he watched the geese flying south for winter, and at night he watched the big blazing stars. Then it started to rain, and soon the rain turned to snow. A storm fell upon him, and through the storm and through the giant snowflakes came a little bluebird, and the bluebird landed near him.
"What do you want, little bird?" said the robot.
"I cut my wing on a rose bush. I couldn't fly. I lost my father. I lost my mother. I lost the whole flock."
"You do not want to be here," said the robot. "I am garbage."
But the little bird didn't say anything. She just was shaking in the cold. The robot looked at her and said,
"There is a door in my chest where my heart used to be. Maybe you can go in there and get warm."
He bent down. He ripped papers off of batteries and gathered pieces of loose wire, and he built a nest inside of his chest for the bluebird. And she crawled into the nest, and the robot shut the door. He sat at the top of the pile, and he looked out, and then something amazing happened. He could feel the little bird's heart beating in his chest. It felt like his old heart used to feel. But then, if the bird would flutter in her dreams or in the cold, he would feel like he was in love, because his own heart would tremble. And then in the morning, when the sun was coming up, he opened the door to his heart, and the bird came out and sang a little song.
"My old heart only said tick-tock, tick-tock, but my new heart can sing."
And then the bird flew off its perch and circled his head and landed back on his chest.
"I cannot believe my new heart is flying."
And he ran to the top of the pile again, and he danced a clinky, clanky robot dance. But the bird landed on his hand and shivered and said, "You are so kind, robot. I almost wish I could stay here. But it is too cold for me. If I stay here, I will die. I must get to my family in the land of always summer." The robot thought,
"I have an idea. Get back in my chest, and I will try to take you to the land of always summer." So the bird got in, and he shut the door to his chest, and he walked forever out of Robot City. And he walked through frozen fields of snow and ice, and walked for miles and miles until he got to the glacier mountains, and then he started to climb. Lightning struck. Giant snowflakes the size of hands fell from the sky. It was hard to see, but he kept walking even though his legs hurt. His arms hurt. All of him, even his brain hurt, but he kept walking. And when he got to the top of the mountains, he looked out, and he saw green fields and blue ponds and purple and pink flowers everywhere. And he walked down into the land of always summer. He opened the door to his heart, and out flew the bird. He reached for it and said, "Always live in my heart." And then his head fell over. His batteries were dead. And even to this day, he stands there like a scarecrow, like an old hollow tree with his arm reaching to the air,
and his head on its side. And the bird always made its nest in the robot's chest, always and forever. And the robot always lived in the heart of the bluebird until the day it died. When I see you smile, heaven could never be half as sweet as all I see. I see a world happy and free when you smile. Oh, fields go to bloom. I smell the sweetest perfume. It's a miracle, the way you light up a room when you smile. It's like a dream come true. When you smile, heaven could never be half as sweet as all I see. I see a world it's happy and free when you smile. When you smile, baby, 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 when you smile, it's like a dream come true.